What we will be doing is disassembling the Lee Classic Cast single stage press. What I mean by disassembly, I mean the removal of the main shaft, shaft linkage, the arm and the arm linkage. The tools we will need are as follows: a 1/2-inch wrench, two 11/16 wrenches, a hex wrench of substantial size. This is a 1/4 inch, doesn't have to be, but you don't want a small one. 2 pin punches with a straight long shaft. You have to have one that's at least 1/8 of an inch, which is this one. And you'll need a larger one. Doesn't have to be a particular size, but it needs to be large enough to cover these pivot pins, but not be so large that it's actually bigger than the pivot pins. The punches I have are the Starrettes, and I can give you a close-up photograph of the actual punch set that I'm using. And then, of course, a hammer to drive the punches. The handle does not have to be removed first. Generally, it's probably the second thing I do. But the order in which you remove the other parts is critical. If you look closely at your shaft, you can see that the top portion is actually screwed on to the main portion. And the first thing we'll do is we'll unscrew this, and then we'll lower the shaft. That will expose the inside of where these 2 pivot pins are. And then from the inside, we'll be punching those out. Okay, once those 2 pins come out, this entire assembly will drop down, because these 2 pivot pins control these 2 arms. Once these are loose, everything comes out. So at this point, we want to take off the upper part of the shaft, and we use our 1/4 inch hex key, and we'll be inserting it into the opening. Now, if you use your press to prime and deprime brass, all your priming system components need to be removed, as well as the plastic tube, because we are dismantling the whole press. Now you'll see this opening here, then you'll see an oblong opening here. As you insert the key to twist in a counterclockwise motion to remove this, I suggest you put the key in the straight part, because when you do and you push on the key is pushed against the inner or inside edges of this opening. If you put your key down in this oblong opening and push, the key is actually making contact with the outside edges. And as you turn, you can start bending or flaring or bulging the metal here. And when you do that, as you work the press, that metal can start scraping against the frame. Let's go ahead and get started. Just insert it and turn it. right, it's off. So at this point, we want to lower the shaft by raising the arm. And then we're going to take off the handle. But I'll show you a close-up of it, but when you take the top piece off and look inside, you'll see the other side of these pivot pins. And what we'll be doing is one of these pivot pins is hollow all the way through, and we use it to punch out the opposite pin. The other pin looks hollow, but it's actually not. But this is the reason why we need a long shaft, because we have to reach through the press to punch out the pin. Now we use a 1/8 inch one because that's the opening in the pivot pin. So we use a 1/8 inch punch, insert it, make contact with the back side of the other pin, and tap it out. Once this one is out, we'll use the longer punch, put it into this opening to tap out the other pin. Now we're going to take off the arm, so we're going to use our 1/2 inch wrench. And by the way, what we're doing is exactly what you would do is if you wanted the arm on the other side of the press. You would not have to take the shaft off. You would just unloosen this bolt, flip things around, and you'll be able to put the arm on this side. I'm going to slip this off, unscrew it, push the bolt through. Now this is not held in place except by friction right now. Okay, we loosen these two nuts, and we'll be able to remove this. And we can do that just slightly. These are the 11/16 wrenches. Just like a little bit more. Okay, at this point, we're now going to punch out the pivot pins. We've got to make sure that the shaft is all the way down. Now on the outside, the pivot pins look identical. There's a small opening in each one. But on one pin, the opening goes all the way through. On the other, it does not. All right, so you take your 1/8 inch punch, put it all the way through so it makes contact with the back side of this one, and then we'll use the hammer to tap out that pin. Here you might be able to see how that end is solid. This one is opened. Now again, these pivot pins hold the linkage arm inside the frame. Okay. So now what we're going to do is from the other side use the larger punch to push out the pin on the opposite side. Make sure that it's contacting the back side of the pin and not up against the frame, because you don't want to be pounding on the frame. Okay, it's beginning to come out. All right, the pin got knocked all the way out. It's on the floor. I'll pick it up. So what's holding up the linkage right now is this punch. So you want to grab the linkage, pull out the punch, and it should drop straight out. So we now have the rest of the shaft and the two linkage arms. Now we'll work on these two. Now this is the pin that came off the floor. You can see, of course, this is the exterior of the pin. It has a small opening, but as you can see, it has the opening goes all the way through. And this is why we use the 1/8" punch, because it goes through this pin to make contact with the opposite one. Okay, we've already loosened these nuts with our 11/16" wrench. This arm comes off. And one thing you'd want to notice, that on one side it has a bowed washer. The other side does not. So when you reinstall it, keep in mind that it goes on concave. So it bows outward. Okay. All right. At this point, we have our press totally disassembled. Again, it's the linkage. I'm not bothering with disassembling the die area. I don't need to do that in order to do major cleaning and re-lubing, which is the reason I took it apart. So at this point, I'm going to clean all the parts. I'm going to clean the inside of the frame. I'm going to re-lubricate everything, and they'll come back online and we'll reassemble it all. I use a degreaser to clean all the individual parts and the opening, the shaft opening in the frame, and the pivot pin openings in the frame. After everything is cleaned and dried off, I like to lay them out, the parts laid out in like a schematic order, and then I lubricate individual ones. Things like the shaft, I'll lubricate with a high quality synthetic oil. The oil has no additives, doesn't have little pieces of microscopic Teflon or any other additives or ingredients to it. It's pure synthetic oil. For things like the pivot pins and the openings for the pivot pins, I like to use an actual grease. So let's go ahead and lay out the schematic, if you will. The next part I'll lay out, this is actually the linkage for the shaft. I have the shaft upside down, but that's because if I try to turn it the other way, this isn't opening big enough and the shaft will just fall over. So you may be asking, how do we know that this linkage arm goes on this side versus this side? Well, they're identical. So it really doesn't matter whether this one's here or this one's here, and the same thing. So I just lay them out, and of course these holes are the openings where these fixed pins would go. And these pins and the openings in there is what I would grease. This coupler goes in between. This is where the handle is attached, and this piece keeps them separated. This double threaded bolt is what will go into here. Now if you recall the bowed washer, there's one of them. It went on the left side. I'm not sure if it has to be on the left side or the right side. But I want to keep it on the left side, and it goes in a concave installation. Then we have the two nuts. Now we have the two linkages for the actual shaft. They're pretty much identical. So which direction do they go on? Well, mine has a little bit of wear to it, so if you look at it, this is fairly clean, that's fairly clean, this is, but then you find some wear marks here. Those wear marks are from the, I'm going to call it built-in washers. This area here is slightly raised from the rest of the linkage arm. Here it's flat. This is slightly raised. So these two went together. So the way they'll get set up is that the stop marks will go on top. And if you notice, they're not in the middle. They're kind of a 1/3, 2/3. Well, the bulk of the space goes on the top. So this would get installed in this fashion. This opening here is what goes into the frame. Same thing here. If you kind of notice, there's the wear mark here that's larger than anything else. That matches the built-in, if you will, raised washer on this linkage arm. The bowed washer goes in between this arm and this arm. And this, of course, is the rest of the parts needed to install the handle. The bolt would go through here once I'm ready to install everything. And these are the two pivot pins. One solid, the other is not. I'm not sure it makes a difference whether the solid one is on the right side of the press or the left side. If you recall, it was on the right side. So I'm just going to keep it that way. So this is now laid out in like a schematic fashion. What I'm going to do next is oil and grease the appropriate parts. The pivot pins will get grease. These linkage openings will get a little bit of grease. The shaft and its top will get oil. So right at this point, I'm going to go stop the video, grease and oil everything, and then we'll come back on for the final assembly. Okay, all the parts have been lubricated. I'm now ready to do the reassembly. If you want, you can actually go ahead and attach the upper part of the shaft to the actual shaft. You don't have to wait till the shaft is installed to do it. We did have to take it off while it's in the press, but that was to remove the pins. Reinstalling the pins, we do that from the outside. So you can go ahead and attach the upper part to the shaft at this point. Now, I'm not going to do it, and the reason is, once I have it fully assembled and push these pins in, there's some grease will probably get down, will get on the inside of the opening for the shaft, and it'll get on the shaft. I really don't want grease on the shaft. I've tried grease, a little bit of grease before, and it just seems to bind the shaft. So once I have it, all these parts except for this installed and the pins installed, I'm going to reach down in there and remove any excess grease, and then I'll reinstall the top part. All right, let's get started. Now what I want to end up with, if you recall the beginning of the video, this top piece is facing this way. When I'm done, I want to actually face it this way so that the shell plate opening is toward me. Now, you can't control that when this is installed. That's controlled by how this is oriented. Now, I have a small mark near the bottom of my main shaft that tells me where this opening will be when it's completely screwed in. So I've got my shaft oriented in that direction now. So to get started, and there's my little mark, lay this down and insert the linkage arms. Put in the spacer. Insert the bolt. Put on the bowed washer. Again, it goes on concave. Insert this arm. Loosely install the nut. Insert this one. I'm going to go ahead and put the bolt through. Now just at this point, I'm just going to put this on just to secure the bolt in place. I'm going to worry about installing the arm, the handle, when it's back in the frame. But I'm just installing this so this stays in place. Now the hammer I'm going to use to install the pivot pins is going to be a smaller hammer because I don't need as much force to put them in. So we've got most things installed here. These are loosely tightened. So let's go ahead and install the shaft into the frame. All right, now we want to install the pivot pins. And just look inside here to make sure everything's lined up. And going in that far is good to hold it. Same thing on this side. Now we're going to use the hammer to secure the pins, and they just need to be flush to the frame. All right, so the pins are now secure. What I'm going to do next is lock down these two nuts, and while I do that, I want to make sure that this is centered in the arms. Otherwise it could be laying way down. It needs to be centered. Now I'm going to go ahead and temporarily remove this so I can easily use my wrench. Just make sure this is still centered. All right, now I'm ready to put on the handle. So the handle will go through this opening. And that goes, of course, into the threads. And again, this is if you wanted the handle on the other side, the bolt, this stays the same, but the bolt would go in this way. And then this would come on this side. And these made up like this, not like that, like that. Then we use a 1/2 inch wrench to tighten it. Now I'm ready to install the top part of the shaft. And as mentioned before, if I've got the main shaft oriented correctly when I'm done, I would like to have the opening facing me. So we start it. First you can go on by hand. But as it gets tighter, get your Allen wrench. Again, 1/4 inch works for me. If you use a bigger one that can't fit in here, go down until you have one that fits in here. I find that if I put it down in this opening and do it, the Allen wrench hits the outer edge, and that could cause the metal to burr out. And as you go down, it'll start scraping the frame. If you go up in this area, the Allen wrench is contacting the inside edge. And that's it. And we test for operation, and it looks like I've got the handle, if you will, too far forward because this won't go down. So I need to loosen this up and rotate the handle back a little bit. And so we're done. But I hope this video has been useful to you, and thank you for watching.